Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, verse 4. Prabhuda karma daivena tayo vimsat tikko gana prerito janayat svahir matra bihadi purusham. Prabhuda, awakened, karma, activities, daivena, by the will of the Supreme, Traya Vimsiddhika, by the 23 principal ingredients, Gana, the combination, Prarita, induced by, Janayat, manifested, Swabhi, by his personal, Matrabhi, plenary expansion, Adipurusham, the gigantic universal form. Translation: when the 23 principal elements were set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form, or the Vishwarupa body of the Lord, came into existence. Purport: the Virat Rupa or Vishwarupa, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, which is very much appreciated by the impersonalists, is not an eternal form of the Lord. It is manifested by the supreme will of the Lord after the ingredients of material creation. Lord Krishna exhibited this Virat or Vishwarupa to Arjuna just to convince the impersonals that he is the original personality of Godhead. Krishna exhibited the Virat Rupa. It is not that Krishna was exhibited by the Virat Rupa. The Virat Rupa is not, therefore, an eternal form of the Lord exhibited in the spiritual sky. It is a material manifestation of the Lord. The Archavigraha, or the worshipable deity in the temple, is a similar manifestation of the Lord for the neophytes. But in spite of their material touch, such forms of the Lord as the Virat and the Archa are all non-different from his eternal form as Lord Krishna. So here again it is stated that the 23 material elements have no independent action, and whatever action they do is ultimately induced by or inspired by the Supreme Lord. In this case, the universal form, which is also material. And as Prabhupada remarks in the purport, this is for less advanced people like impersonalists or yogis or whatever, just to give some idea that the Lord is behind everything. And as Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport, Virat Rupa was manifested to Arjuna by Arjuna's request by Krishna, and then Arjuna later on requested, take that form away. I don't want to see that form anymore. So then it disappeared, and there was Krishna standing there, 4 arms and then 2 arms. So it could be manifested by Krishna's will. Now, of course, even the spiritual forms can be manifested by Krishna, or they can also be made to disappear, as we see in the case of Krishna manifesting cowherd boys and calves into Vishnu forms who were creators of universes. And then he made them all disappear. But this is a little different. These forms, our Vishnu forms, are actually eternal. But ultimately, this whole pastime with the bewilderment of Brahma is to illustrate the fact that ultimately all the other forms are ultimately dependent on the will of Krishna. And though they are eternal, he can make them appear to us or make them disappear from our vision at will. Even though they're all one in one sense, yes, Krishna is supreme. So even he is the master of all the other forms which are eternal. But here we have the example of a form which is not eternal, but manifested by the Lord, made out of material elements. So this is the Virat Purusha. It is considered to be inferior because of that. So in any case, what we learn from all these descriptions of the universal form described in the Bhagavatam is that ultimately material energy is not independent of the Supreme Lord, dependent on him. But on the higher level, as far as Bhagavatam is concerned, it's there to teach us that ultimately this Purusha avatar, that's Mahavishnu, who glances over Prakriti and causes everything to manifest. Even he, that Purusha, is not the supreme form. In one sense, yes, he is also Supreme Lord, but he's actually, say, inferior, in a lower position from the forms in the spiritual world. And the forms in the spiritual world are inferior, you can say that, to Krishna. So, of course, it's when we say inferior, we don't really mean inferior, but we say they manifest less qualities in that particular form. And ultimately, Bhagavatam is pointing out that Krishna is the ultimate object of worship for everyone, not even Vishnu forms or Purusha forms. So, this is made clear in many of the different commentaries. Yes, Purusha is supreme and he glances over material energy, but that Purusha also has his source. And that is the whole lesson we learn from the vision that Brahma had. He's the cowherd boys turn into Vishnu forms and suddenly they disappear. And only Krishna is standing there in Vrindavan holding a ball of yogurt rice in his hand and clutching his flute. And so that little boy in Vrindavan was the source, in one sense, of all the Vishnu forms, though they're eternal. But he ultimately is in control of everything. So all the Vishnu forms that create universes, all the Mahavishnu, Garbhadaksha Vishnu, Kshirodaksha Vishnu, who are Purusha avatars, are ultimately in a hierarchy of forms, and Krishna's at the very top. So when we study these verses from Bhagavatam describing the creation and the universal form and Mahavishnu glancing, we try to understand how it's working, but at the same time, the main import for us is that above that, even though this Vishnu form is all powerful in terms of he is manifesting material world, still this is nothing compared to Krishna. And that is what Brahma realized when he saw all these cowherd boys and calves, which were, there are millions of them, turn into Vishnu forms, and the Vishnu forms were in charge of universes. And then they all disappeared, and only Krishna was standing there. So without any effort, Krishna showed how he is ultimately in control of everything, and he is that supreme form, in spite of the fact that he doesn't look like he has any power at all, because he's just a 5-year-old boy running around Vrindavan and eating curd rice and playing with the cowherd boys. But nevertheless, he is that supreme entity. So this, of course, is a little astonishing because that was the whole problem with Brahma. He said, how can Krishna be God? Because he's just playing around, joking. And therefore he stole all the calves and cows. But then he understood, oh, yes, it's very deceptive. Krishna is a cowherd boy, and he doesn't appear to manifest powers, but he has all those powers in him. He has more powers than all the Vishnu forms or any of the avatar forms. So Brahma realized that the appearance was deceptive. Nevertheless, this becomes the highest form. So though Krishna hides his powers in Vrindavan, and for the people of Vrindavan, of course, they're not interested in powers at all. So even if the powers are manifested, they don't see them, they cover them up. We should never think that, yes, Krishna is very sweet, but actually we have better forms that show more powers, like Nrsimhadev, Hiranyakasipu, etc. Or Mahavishnu glancing over material energy. Krishna is very sweet, but he's not so powerful. No, Krishna has all that power. Whatever power Vishnu has, whatever power Nrsimha has, whatever power Ramchandra has, Krishna has all that power, plus he's got more power. Plus, he's got the sweetness that they don't have. So that's Krishna in Vrindavan. So very spectacularly, he can be the sweet little Krishna in Vrindavan with showing no powers, and simultaneously within Vrindavan, he can also show all of his powers, as he showed to Brahma. So that's the remarkable nature of Krishna. So therefore, we look at Krishna and we see him as a playful cowherd boy, but we should never think he has less powers. He has more powers than any of them. That was also shown in the story of with the cowherd boys getting bewildered by Brahma, because Balaram was also bewildered for 1 year. He also didn't know that Krishna had expanded himself into calves and cowherd boys and like that. He was thinking, oh, yeah, we're all going out together and playing in the fields, the calves and cowherd boys, etc. So for 1 year, he thought, okay, this is normal. But then he realized it wasn't normal after 1 year, because even Krishna could not hide the fact that even if he disguises himself as calves and cowherd boys, his sweetness is so much that the cows became overwhelmed by the sweetness of their calves, who were actually Krishna. And the mothers and fathers were overwhelmed by the sweetness of their sons, who were actually Krishna. So they thought they were their sons at the same time. Their sons became better, and the calves became better than normal cows. So nobody really realized that for 1 year. But then Balaram saw, this is very strange. Suddenly, cows are so attracted to their calves, and mothers and fathers are so attracted to their sons. Usually everyone's attracted to Krishna. Now they're attracted to their sons. What is this? So he began to think about it. Is it the devatas playing tricks on us? Is demons playing tricks on us? The sages playing tricks on us? Nobody can bewilder me. That's what Balaram thought. But then he thought, oh, Krishna can bewilder me. And then he looked and he said, oh yeah, it's all Krishna. So in this way, Balaram also understood, yes, Krishna is ultimately in control. And he can use his yoga maya even to bewilder Balaram, who's right next to him, and his brother is older than him, but he can bewilder him also. So that's why we put Krishna at the very top, then we put Balaram, then we put the other expansions in Vaikuntha, and then we put the Purusha avatars down below who are dealing with the material world. So these forms that are described here are actually these forms here, dealing with the material world, very powerful. But if we trace back, then ultimately at the top we have Krishna, who's the most powerful of all. But the amazing thing is that in that highest position, he hides all of his powers. And instead of that, he manifests his Madhurya aspect, his sweetness. And that actually becomes greater than his powers. But we should not think that he has less powers because of that. The powers are all there. It's also described how when Krishna appears in the material world, all of the other forms of the God, or the Supreme Lord, they also merge into the body of Krishna when he appears. So we have Varaha and Nrsimha and Rama and Vishnu. Everybody's inside the body of Krishna, which is only to illustrate that everything's in Krishna ultimately. And he's the sum total of all that, plus he's a little extra because he shows his sweetness and he has power over that. Yeah. So that is the ultimate conclusion of Bhagavatam. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. He is ultimately supreme. And therefore we should worship him. But again, this aspect of power is but a small manifestation. As was previously quoted, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that all of this is just one spark of my splendor. So the whole manifestation of all the material universes, and Mahavishnu glancing at this small speck of the powers of Krishna. Also, Prabhupada describes how all the universes together, all matter, all of this is like a little cloud in the sky. It's nothing. So it doesn't require a great power of Krishna to manifest that else. He expands into expansion to expansion, expansion, and then Mahavishnu, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Kshirodaksha Vishnu, they handle all of that in the material world. So the important part of the activities of the Lord are in the spiritual world. And that's where the Lord manifests his superior energy rather than this material energy. So that's actually the most important part, where the Lord manifests through his Chit Shakti, whole spiritual world, and all of his spiritual activities there, which are filled with prema. So we have the discussions of the material world here. Why? Well, we have to bother with them at all because people of the material world ask questions about it. That's all. Why are we here? What's this matter? What's this universe? What's these planets? What are these elements here? Whatever like that. So it's, a common question that people begin to ask. So They need answers to that. But through these answers, we eventually get back to the Supreme Lord. So there is what we call Sankhya, which means literally counting or enumerating. So we get Sankhya philosophy, which enumerates all the elements, or not just the elements, also Jiva and Supreme Lord. So everything that exists is enumerated: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is, we could say, left brain activity. Just try to calculate everything. So they calculate all the elements. So this becomes what we call Sankhya philosophy. Of course, atheistic Sankhya don't have Supreme Lord. They have Jiva, but no Supreme Lord, and then they have the same elements that we have. But it's an attempt to put the existence into our rational type of thinking. Okay, we want to know what the material world, here it is, da, 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 da. Plus there's a Jiva there. And for the other Sankhya of the Kapila and the Bhagavatam, who's different from the atheistic Sankhya, then we have a Supreme Lord behind that. So in this way, we get an analysis of everything in existence. Enumerating. Why is it necessary? Ultimately, not necessary from the spiritual point of view, but from our point of view, we get curious about these things, so therefore they all get analyzed. Similarly, in the Western world, same thing happens. They get curious, so then they develop things like chemistry and physics and stuff to start analyzing the elements, whatever like that. Necessary? Maybe not, but they get curious, so they want to do this. But then, of course, they have practical purposes, and then they can utilize these elements in different ways for different purposes. So that for human beings in the material world, they wonder about these things, so answers are given. But here, the difference here in Vedic philosophy and Bhagavad philosophy and material science and whatever in the Western world is that this, of course, is based upon scripture. Secondly, it involves something you cannot see. We can see the elements. We can play around with the different energies, whatever. But we cannot see a Supreme Lord. We cannot see a Jiva. So these are the important things that are added to the analysis of Sankhya that are not there in like the Western perception of let's analyze everything. And added to that, then behind this whole thing, okay, Supreme Lord, then we start defining that Supreme Lord. Okay, he's the creator, and most religions will accept that. God is the creator. But then here Bhagavatam says, no, that's the Purusha avatar. He's the creator, but he's just an amsa of an amsa of an amsa. Expansion of expansion of expansion. So not only we have to accept that there's a Purusha who we cannot see, who's glancing over everything, but above that we have other higher and higher levels of existence till we get to Krishna at the top, who we can also not see. So all that is, we have to take from the scripture. We cannot take that from, material analysis and say, well, prove it first, then I'll believe it. Cannot do that. So we're free to choose. Okay, material elements, they just have a big bang and it just happens by chance. That's how material creation takes place, and the result is human beings. The other way is to put it back to a supreme, intelligent, compassionate person who has all sorts of wonderful activities, and he is responsible for all of this manifestation in the material world. So we have a choice. There's some intelligence behind the creation with a purpose, or there's an accidental creation of matter combining with no purpose at all. We have a choice. We want to choose. So in this way, the Bhagavatam is presenting a very elevated version of that, because not only we accept the supreme entity, the Supreme Lord, but behind that Purusha, who is like the supreme creator, then we have higher and higher levels until we get Krishna on top, who doesn't even appear like a creator at all or have any powers. He's just playing around in the fields. So it's all beyond speculation. So all we can do is accept the version of the Bhagavatam. But we can say is, we can reason it also. Why we have a cowherd boy at the top? Why don't we have a king at the top? Why do we have a cowherd boy at the top of everything? And the reason is that ultimately the jiva prefers sweetness over power. That's why. The happiness derives from sweet relations, intimate relationships, rather than formal relationships of power. So that's why we have Krishna at the top. Okay, any question?
So Maharaj, you sort of just answered this question, but just to clarify, so we understand, like the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, Krishna is at the top, like there's no form beyond him.
Yeah.
And as Prabhupada mentions, the Vishnu comes from Krishna, not the other way around. The Vishnu forms come from Krishna. So, we've got personalities like the Dasavatar. You can have devotees of these different forms, but is that their eternal relationship with Krishna, with the Supreme, like in these Dasavatar personalities? Or I'm just thinking of the example, like the sages of Dandakaranya, they saw Lord Ram, they desired a conjugal relationship, so Krishna Lila, they appeared as gopis. So is that in a sense a promotion? Or was their original relationship always with Krishna anyway?
Well, the forms are all eternal. So we have eternal forms like Varaha, Nrsimha, Rama, etc. So we should never think of them as just manifest in the material world and they disappear only in the spiritual world. We have Vishnu, which is a kind of a concept that I think the Sri Sampradaya has. Ultimately, Vishnu is in Vaikuntha, and Krishna and avatars only manifest in the material world, but so they're like temporary. So, no, you say that all the forms are eternal in the spiritual world, and even the Shaktavesh avatars like Narada Muni are eternal. They have spiritual bodies in the spiritual world, so they're distinguished from other jivas like Brahma, who has a material body, who is a guna avatar. So, they're all eternal, and one can have a relationship with them, so therefore we have the devotees of Rama all around Rama, and that's the eternal relationship, and they stay there, etc. In the spiritual world. As far as the sages of Dandakaranya who saw Rama, then actually they desired to have a conjugal relationship with the Lord, but it's not possible with Rama. So they actually hadn't really attained their full, satisfaction with that form. So we can't say that's their eternal form, and then they got another eternal form like that. So then they were actually, you can say, sadhakas, people doing sadhana and aspiring. So they saw Rama, and they said, actually, we want to have Madhurya Rasa. We can't have it with Rama. Huh? So in other words, they also desired to be like gopis. So that was their aspiration, even when they saw Rama. So therefore, that their form was with Krishna, not with Rama. Huh? We'll find similarly with Gopakumar and Srimad Bhagavatam. He goes to Ayodhya in the spiritual world and sees Rama after he goes to Vaikuntha. I said, okay, it is a little sweeter than Vaikuntha. The relationship with Rama is a little more intimate, but he still wasn't satisfied with that. So then he went to Krishna finally. So in that sense, the jiva, if he has a certain aspiration, he cultivates that, then he's not satisfied with other forms of the Lord even. Like Murari Gupta was not, Lord Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, okay, you should worship Krishna. And then he thought about it overnight and he came back and said, I cannot worship Krishna. I've dedicated myself to Ramchandra, so I cannot change. That, of course, was his eternal position because he was actually like Hanuman.
I think in the Leela with Lord Brahma, where the cows and the boys were becoming so sweet, I think you said that Krishna couldn't control that sweetness. Is that literally we take like that, or is it the love of the devotees that made him not control it? So do we take it literally, or that he couldn't control his sweetness? Or
I think we can say it's the same thing. Because of his attraction to his devotee, then his sweetness could not be suppressed. Even if he was in a different body of a cowherd boy, his relationship with the parents, because they desired to have Krishna as their son, began to manifest very nicely. And so they developed more and more love for their child, who was actually Krishna, but they didn't know it. So we can say it's a response that his, let's say, love for his devotee was uncontrolled.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the class, Maharaj. Is it the correct understanding that Nrsimhadev and Varaha and all those incarnations, they're an avatar of Krishna, but Lord Chaitanya is not even an avatar, he's directly Krishna himself. And if that's the case also that Lord Chaitanya came and he's the most merciful incarnation, but yet he's kind of like hidden. Not many people also in India know about him unless they come to like Krishna consciousness or they go the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And just understanding Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna.
Yeah, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is non-different from Krishna, so he's not avatar. So we also call him avatari, like Krishna we call avatari, the source of the avatars. So we also say the same thing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita it is said that Krishna was in the spiritual. Well, one thing, of course, he's Yuga avatar, but then the other aspect is he is Krishna and he's thinking about Radharani and how great is her love and how sweet is her love and how she goes into the Mahabhav states when she sees Krishna. So then Krishna wonders, well, what is she experiencing? What is the greatness of her love? But he can't experience it because he is Krishna, the object of her love. So therefore he decides, okay, I will take the mood of Radha in order to understand something of the sweetness and greatness of her love. So therefore he is Krishna, but he takes the mood of Radha as a devotee of Krishna, and that becomes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he's internally Krishna, externally golden with the mood of Radha. But in doing so also, he hides his nature as the Supreme Lord. He must do that because he's not acting as Krishna anymore, he's acting as the devotee of Krishna. So we call him Bhakta Avatar, that he is the Supreme Lord, but he's manifesting himself as a devotee of the Lord. So this kind of helps hide his position as Supreme Lord. Another factor, of course, is he's called Chanda Avatar, or hidden avatar, because in Scripture it says the Lord appears in 3 yugas. So he appears, in different yugas for different yuga dharmas. But in Kali Yuga, he shouldn't appear. So then who's going to do the Yuga Dharma for Kali Yuga if the Lord's only appearing in 3 yugas, not in Kali Yuga? So usually this is a Shaktivesh avatar, so that they're simultaneously the Lord and not the Lord, so that fulfills the idea that it's only the Lord in 3, because Vishnu Tattva in 3 yugas, and then Shaktivesh Jiva in Kali Yuga. But then in the case of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it is Supreme Lord himself, but still he has to fulfill that prediction, 3 yuga. So therefore he doesn't proclaim himself the Supreme Lord, and he hides his nature, and he acts like a normal human being. So it's difficult for people to understand if he's Supreme Lord or not, because he hides himself. But to his devotees, of course, then he reveals himself, as he does to Advaitacharya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and other devotees. Sometimes he reveals his form as Nrsimhadev or universal form, or Radha and Krishna, etc. But normally it's all hidden.
I have a further question also, that even amongst devotees sometimes they think that worship of Radha Krishna is higher than worshipping. Sorry. Even amongst devotees sometimes even though we are hearing, then some devotees say worship of Radha Krishna is higher than worshipping Gauranita, and you should do the best service for Radha Krishna, and then sometimes the garlands doesn't matter, it's not so good for Gauranita, things like that.
Well, actually they're non-different, so we can't say one is higher than the other. But in order to realize Radha and Krishna, we have to go through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he came, of course, he came to experience the mood of Radha. He also came to give Yuga Dharma, Nam Sankirtan. And then another thing is, he came to give Radha Krishna love to the people of Kali Yuga. So it's through him that we can approach Radha and Krishna. So therefore, we can never neglect Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We can't say, oh, go just worship Radha and Krishna. In fact, in the deity worship, we have to worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in order to worship Radha and Krishna. We go through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, we also go through the Guru and go through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then we can worship Radha Krishna. So it's only with that qualification of worshiping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu we can worship Radha and Krishna and realize him. It's through his mercy that we can do this. So we can never bypass Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
I had my hand up earlier, Yadanath Prabhu. Just a quick question, Maharaj. So you were saying that the Leela avatars like Shrimadev, Varaha, etc., they're eternally manifested, they're incarnations of the Lord. So do they have their planets in the Vaikuntha planets? There's a planet devoted to Varaha and the Shrimadev, etc.?
Yeah, that's stated by Rupa Goswami, Lagu Bhagavatamrita. He also says they have planets in the material world. We can't see them, but there's like a Matsya Loka and a Varaha Loka somewhere down near the material world floating around. We can't even see them. They're also there, but they're also in the spiritual world because they have eternal devotees.
Maharaj, is it considered advantageous at all to be in the material world as opposed to being in Vaikuntha because we have access to Radha Krishna Leela, or the ability to, or potential to enter into Radha Krishna Leela, whereas the Vaikuntha buses are permanently stuck in that position?
Yeah, in one sense. Of course, they don't think like that, but yeah, once they're eternal associates of Vishnu, so they don't change that relationship. They are Nitya Siddhas. Garuda is always there with, and he never changes his position. So yeah, they're fixed in those positions. And from our point of view, yes, we have that privilege, so to speak, because of the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to understand all of this, the Bhagavatam, etc., that Krishna is the highest. But in other yugas, in material world, they also don't get that opportunity because generally they're worshiping other forms. They don't understand about Krishna until Lord Krishna appears, and then Lord Chaitanya appears to show how he is supreme. So only our particular Kali Yuga is most fortunate. The others generally go to Vishnu also, or other forms of the Lord.
Maharaj, you mentioned the expansions in Narayan in the form of the cowherd boys. So sometimes when you think of that pastime, you think there's just Krishna expands and draws back in. But I've heard recently they're actually different. The various Narayans that came from Vaikuntha form that pastime. They're not just off the rack Narayan, so to speak. They're not just cloned out expansion. They're actually individual personalities that slip out of Vaikuntha to assist in pastime, then slip back in.
Well, we shouldn't think that even these forms are limited. They're all eternal, and ultimately they're all one because there's only one Supreme Lord. So in one sense, they're all the same, whether it's Krishna or Vishnu, whatever. So they actually are abheda. They're non-different. And even the Purusha avatar, who is manifest in material world, is also non-different from the Vaikuntha form. He even has the same form as Vishnu. Mahashankarshan has the same form as Shankarshan and Vaikuntha, etc. But they're also one. So simultaneously, they're all one with Krishna, and simultaneously they manifest differently because they manifest different amounts of qualities and slightly different pastimes, etc. So therefore, they're also differentiated. So these forms that Krishna can manifest, they were shown to be lords of universes, more or less, with all the devatas and Brahma and material elements, doing like that, worshipped by the devas and demons, etc. So it was kind of in relationship with the material world. So that's more like the Mahavishnu or Garbhodakshaya Vishnu forms than the Vaikuntha forms, where they would simply be worshipped by their associates, 400 associates in the spiritual world with Lakshmi, etc. It looks more like the Garbhodakshay Vishnu form.
Maharaj, when you were talking about that degree of sweetness that we're attracted to, I was thinking in the Padyavali, I think it's by a collection of poems by Rupa Goswami. So there's this one poem that describes little Krishna sitting there, and you can see the light coming between his fingers, the pinkish colour. And he's eating sweet rice, like you said, but he's eating with the wrong hand.
Yeah. Oh, this was the whole problem with Brahma. He saw Krishna with a picnic with his cowherd boys, and they were all eating, but they weren't eating like, normal people sit in a row and you eat with your right hand and you don't touch other people. They were, exchanging food, and there's food on his body and everything like this. Eating with both hands, probably like this, so, how can this be the Supreme Lord? Because he's just like a little ordinary human boy smearing the food all over his body.
No more questions? Sadly for us, everyone, this morning is Bhanu Maharaj's final class here at New Govardhana. He'll be leaving at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. If anyone would like to give Maharaj a small donation or a large donation towards his travelling and preaching, I know he'd be very grateful. And as many of us know, Maharaj is doing wonderful service of translating many of our glorious predecessor Acharya's works into English, and so he would definitely appreciate some. He doesn't make very much Lakshmi from doing that, but it's a service of love that he does, and those books are all available on Amazon, wonderful literatures of our predecessor Acharyas. So thank you very much, Maharaj, for visiting us again here at New Govardhana, and Ganga Prabhu, safe travels. I always remember Krishna Kirtan saying that you loved COVID, Krishna Kirtan, because we had Bhanu Maharaj, you were grounded here for 9 months, and we got to hear your wonderful classes several times a week. So, but perhaps we can all thank His Holiness Bhanu Maharaj Swami Ki.